Hi, boys and girls. It's Miss Stephanie. Today I'm going to read the book The Little House by Virginia Burton. It was a favorite of my kids growing up, and actually it was one of my favorites from when I was a little girl. So I hope you all enjoy it. Once upon a time, there was a little house way out in the country. She was a pretty little house, and she was strong and well built. The man who built her said, "This little house shall never be sold for gold or silver, and she will live to see our great great grandchildren's great great grandchildren living in her." The little house was very happy as she sat on the hill and watched the countryside around her. She watched the sun rise in the morning and set in the evening. Day followed day, each one a little bit different from the one before, but the little house stayed just the same. In the nights, she watched the moon grow from a thin little new moon to a full moon, and then back again into a thin old moon. And when there was no moon, she watched the stars. Way off in the distance, she could see the lights of the city. The little house was curious about the city and wondered what it would be like to live in one. Time passed quickly for the little house as she watched the countryside slowly change with the seasons. In the spring, when the days grew longer and the sun warmer, she waited for the first robin to appear. She watched the grass turn green, and she watched the buds on the trees swell and the apple trees burst into blossom. She watched the children playing in the brook. In the long summer days, she sat in the sun and watched the trees cover themselves with leaves, and the white daisies cover the hill. She watched the gardens grow and watched the apples turn red and ripen. She watched the children swimming in the pool. In the fall, when the days grew shorter and the nights colder, she watched the first frost turn the leaves to bright yellow and orange and red. She watched the harvest gathered and the apples picked. She watched the children going back to school. In the winter, when the nights were long and the days were short, and the countryside was covered with snow, she watched the children coasting and skating. Year followed year. The apple trees grew old, and new ones were planted. The children grew up and went away to the city, and now at night the lights of the city seemed brighter and closer. One day, the little house was so surprised to see a horseless carriage coming down the winding country road. A horseless carriage is another word for a car. Pretty soon along came surveyors, and they surveyed a line in front of the little house. Pretty soon along came a steam shovel. There's the steam shovels right here. So there's one steam shovel there. Then some trucks came and dumped big stone on the ground, and some trucks with little stones, and then some trucks with tar and sand. And finally a steamroller came, and the road was done. They dug through the hill with the daisies. Now the little house watched the trucks and automobiles going back and forth to the city. Gasoline stations, roadside stands, and small houses followed the new road. Everyone and everything moved faster now than ever before. See all the cars in front of the little house. Everything's getting very busy. More roads were made, and the countryside was divided into lots. More houses, bigger houses, apartment houses, tenement houses, schools, stores, garages, everything spread over the land and crowded around the little house. No one wanted to live in her or take care of her anymore, but she couldn't be sold for gold or silver, so she just stayed and watched. Everything was built around her. Now it was not so quiet and peaceful at night. Now the lights of the city were very bright and very close. and the streetlights shone all night. This must be living in the city, thought the little house. And she didn't know whether she liked it or not. She missed the field of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. Pretty soon there were trolley cars going back and forth in front of the little house. They went back and forth for a good part of the night, too. Everyone seemed very busy, and everyone seemed to be in a very big hurry. Pretty soon, there was an elevated train going back and forth in front of the little house. You can just see the little house peeking out right there. The noise was so loud it shook the little house. Now she couldn't tell when the spring came, or summer, or fall, or winter. It all seemed just about the same. Pretty soon there was a subway going back and forth underneath the little house. So one on top, the elevated, and one underneath the subway. Oh my goodness. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it and hear it. People were moving faster and faster. No one noticed the little house anymore. They hurried without a glance. There she is right there. Pretty soon, they tore down the apartment houses and tenement houses around the little house and started digging great big cellars, like basements. One on each side. The steam shovels dug down 3 stories on one side and 4 stories on the other side. Pretty soon they started building up. They built up 25 stories on one side and 35 stories on the other side. There she is, right in the middle of it all. Now the little house only saw the sun at noon and didn't see the moon at all. The lights of the city were too bright. She didn't like living in the city. And at night she would dream of the country and the field of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. There's our little house right there. The little house was very sad and lonely. Her paint was cracked and dirty. Her windows were broken and her shutters hung crookedly. She looked shabby, though she was just as good a house as ever underneath. Then, one fine spring morning, along came the great-great-granddaughter of the man who had built the little house so well. She saw the shabby little house, but she didn't hurry by like everybody else. She said to her husband, "That little house looks just like the little house my grandmother lived in when she was a little girl. Only that little house was way out in the country on a hill covered with daisies and apple trees growing around." That doesn't look like a hill with daisies or apple trees growing around. They found out it was the very same house. So they went to the movers to see if the little house could be moved. The movers looked at the little house all over and said, "Sure, this house is as good as ever. She's built so well we could move her anywhere." So they jacked up the little house and put her on wheels. Traffic was held up for hours, and they slowly moved her out of the city. She's going on an adventure, our little house. At first, the little house was frightened. But after a while, she got used to it and kind of liked it. They rolled along the big road, and they rode along the little roads until they were way out in the country. When the little house saw the green grass and heard the birds singing, she didn't feel sad anymore. They went along, but they couldn't seem to find just the right place. They tried the little house here, and they tried her there. Finally, they saw a little hill in the middle of a field with apple trees growing all around. "There," said the great-great-granddaughter, "that's just the place." "Yes, it is," said the little house to herself. A cellar was dug on top of the hill, and slowly they moved the house from the road to the hill. The windows and shutters were fixed, and once again they painted her a lovely shade of pink. As the little house settled down on her new foundation, she smiled happily. Once again, she could watch the sun and the moon and the stars at night. Once again, she could watch spring, summer, fall, and winter come and go. Once again, she was lived in, taken care of, and was happy. Never again would she be curious about the city. Never again would she want to live there. The stars twinkled above her. A new moon was coming up. It was spring, and all was quiet and peaceful in the country. There's our little house, nice and happy. The end. Hope you enjoyed it.